And we are here with a special guest, Yvonne, who's going to talk to us about the sandwich generation. Thank you for joining me, Yvonne.
Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah. And so I know Yvonne, we worked together at another hospice agency back in 2019. And so now we're partnering up because she's been busy doing a lot of things, Yvonne, huh?
Yes, busy, busy.
Yeah. So I'll just catch our audience up. So Yvonne used to be a community liaison at a hospice we worked for. And she, considers herself a social worker. Are you a social worker? Like by
My
education?
bachelor's was cultural anthropology, and then I
Yeah.
worked in a women's shelter for 4.5 years during college.
So lots of resources and lots of service. Yeah, but what you told me was so powerful when we reconnected. You said, I'm more than a marketer. And you said hospice is community work. And so she created a company. It's recently updated its name, but it was called Sandwiched in California. So today, that's what we're talking about, the sandwich generation. Who can you call navigating the caregiver lifestyle with parents and with children? So tell me how you would define the sandwich generation and how you came up with your company.
So the sandwich generation, by definition, is a generation of people typically in their 30s or 40s, responsible for bringing up their own children and for the care of their aging parents. My
Mm,
definition is people can be in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s at this
mm,
point because we are all living longer. So let's say somebody is in their 50s, that person can be caring for their parents in the 70s and possibly even the grandparents in the 90s. And when
mm,
you're in your 50s, your children might be in the 30s. I think 50 years ago, somebody who's 30 would have been, an adult, right? You work at Sears and you support a family of four. Whereas today, in your 30s, you can be 35 with a bachelor's degree, and depending on where you live, but let's say you live in California,
mhm,
you might not be able to afford a two-bedroom apartment by yourself,
mm,
so it's somebody in their 50s, they have their children in 30s who also have children that are younger as well. And so you're seeing a sandwich person who's taking care of multi-generations at this point.
mm. Wow. That is something, you reminded me of something that happened recently at work. I was talking to a caregiver who had just moved her parents across the country. So they were in her home. She had a young child, and we were doing a telehealth visit, and she was just choked up in tears about the state of things in our country. She said something to the effect of she thought it was an issue that the maternity leave concerns are an issue, but she kind of lost her breath, and I mean that in kind of like an emotional way. She said not having a plan for seniors is just horrible. And she was sounded so desperate. And that kind of made me think I have to really, curate some resources for people. So I'm so glad we reconnected in that time because where do they go if someone suddenly finds their parents ill? I'm just wondering, what can you Google? Is it the Office of Aging? I see there's one for every, county, but what do you do? Everyone's not eligible for hospice. We haven't figured out community palliative care. How do we stop people from being in and out of the hospital? All this stuff. Like, how can we get people resources and get them stable? Like, why is it chaos all the time? So anyway, that's what I want to talk about. So this is the kickoff of that, helping people who find themselves in the situation. So tell us about how they can get resources or how you put them together.
Yeah,
Kind of
I
tell us. Mhm.
totally understand what the person is going through. Like I said, back in the days, it could be one spouse working, and the other person can stay behind taking care of the child and their parents. But that's not true anymore. We're talking about at least two people in the household have to be working to sustain the family. And so here you are with somebody who's already stressed out from work, and then they also have to care for their aging parents. And you would think that as a country that we would have enough resources or a system or a process down by now, but we don't. But for that person, I would say to be very general, there's websites from the government. You can go on my website, it's very direct, and then I have a list of some of those resources. So my website is gawaservices.com. That's spelled GAWA services.com. And under the resource page, you will find programs for people with disability. There's a link for programs for seniors. There's a link for program for social services in general, because because a lot of times, a lot of programs is a state-based program. So when you're talking about somebody in California, there's a lot more social services programs compared to another state with a lot less resources.
Well, I'll definitely put a link to your website in the show notes, and maybe that can help them, do their internet research. Because I think I'd like to say that we have a lot of resources in California to help support the public. So maybe that can help them.
Yeah, like for example, the Medicaid program in California, we call it Medi-Cal. So Medi-Cal, you can sign up within about a month, but we're talking about other states like Texas or something like that. The waiting list is 10 years. So you can see the vast difference between the two. Yes, 10 years.
10 years?
10 years waiting list. Yes, that is if it exists at all. Some other states, I want to say Kentucky or Indiana, that might have a copay for the Medicaid program over there. So each state has very different program services available to the people.
Wow. Well, I'm looking at your logo. I actually got your previous logo sandwiched in California. And I want you to share with the listeners, your story. You shared something very personal that happened to you in 2018. Do you want to share that with everyone?
Yeah. So in 2018, my mom got diagnosed with AML, which is a very aggressive form of cancer. So all of a sudden, I remember one night that really stood out. It was me coming over to help my mom with her IV antibiotics. And by the time I got home, it was 2 a.m. And, this, given the fact my mom only lived like 5-10 minutes away, it's not that big of a deal. But still, I came home at 5 a.m. Now, I have 2 kids that one of them had sleep issue, and he woke me up at 6 o'clock. So I slept from 2 to 6, and then I took care of him, and then I went to work at around 8 or 9. So you can imagine I was a walking zombie. Another thing, unfortunately, was that while my mom was having cancer and our whole family was thrown into this, my kids were showing symptoms of autism. So we had to get them diagnosed at the same time. And both my husband and I were both college educated. I'm in healthcare. I work in the community. I know many resources. And we were just so frustrated with the whole system of getting our kids diagnosed and getting them all the therapy set up. We felt like we went from one agency and they just pointed to a different agency and say, no, you got to go there first. You go there, and they pointed back at each other, and you're just kind of going a little crazy here. And again, my husband and I, we talked and we said, we're smart people. We know our rights and we speak English. What about people who doesn't speak any English? What about people who is, afraid to rock the boat and just don't know their rights? So what happened to those people? And when you have a child who say have autism or any other developmental delay, there is no time to wait. You need early intervention as soon as possible. So now you have, a parent to have to work and at the same time being told to go in different directions, and then the child is unfortunately left behind.
Wow. So you got those resources, and then what happened, with your mom? I heard you mentioned she needed a bone marrow transplant, and
Yes,
you had to work on some logistics.
Yes, she needed a stem cell transplant, and we're Vietnamese American, and so my mom's perfect match was her sister in Vietnam. And unfortunately, when my aunt was applying for a visa, she got denied 4 times by the US consulate. They cited that they were afraid that there was nothing to compel her enough to go back to Vietnam. In other words, they were afraid that once she comes to the US, she would use that situation to stay in the US illegally. So we were told no 4 times. And I don't take no for an answer. I've seen many situations before. I believe all things are possible. You just might have to go it through a different way. And so I went to the media and I told the media about the situation. And, it's so interesting that as soon as I was on TV, all these politicians started calling me and offering me help. The same people who said, sorry, there's nothing we can do. This actually happened pretty often. And I said, wait, really? You know about the situation that this happened in the minority community, and
Mm,
you, the congressman, haven't changed anything,
mm,
right? So our news spread across the world in different languages and everything. And
mm,
I was working with a lot of politicians to change the law. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit. And then again, if the politicians aren't dragged into the news, they don't get anything done, unfortunately.
mm.
So, but since I've been on the news, there have been many people have come to me to ask for help, and I have been able to help 4 people, which is
Mhm.
not a lot, but I know that to those families that means the world to them.
Wow. So they denied it 4 times, and then she never was able to come, right?
No, she actually did end up coming. Kamala Harris intervened with the USCIS, and so my aunt was granted a visa. It's called the emergency visa. So she was granted, and she did come to the US. Another what I've been saying all along is that time is of the essence a lot in healthcare. So by the time my
Mm.
aunt did come, it was my mom's leukemia was already too advanced, and she didn't make it.
Time, time. And that's why I want to get these stories out here. I commend you for taking your story and then turning it into a powerful force and mission to help others. And I think that's why we're all kindred in healthcare, the end of life care that we do, so that we can help people get what they need from our broken healthcare system. So I'm looking at that beautiful photo right behind you. Is that your mom in the photo?
That's my mom. This is our
Mm.
family. So my sister and I and our husbands. And then this at the time, my son Atticus was the first grandchild. So he got all good.
Oh,
Now he has three other cousins. Well, one sibling and 2 more cousins.
yeah, well, I know you are making your mom proud, and I love how she's like right there in this video with us. That is
Yeah.
fantastic. And so, listeners, this has just been a wonderful connection for me to connect with Yvonne. I'll put some resources in the show note, but our valuable resource of the week is this woman who created Sandwiched in California, now known as Gawa. So we're going to put some things together for you. This is the beginning of a couple weeks of caregiver resources. Just when you find yourself in this situation and needing to get resources timely, time
Mhm.
is of the essence. So I appreciate you coming. Is there anything else you want to say to the community before we wrap up our time?
I would just say that don't lose hope. There's hope out there. There's resources out there. And I know that it's very frustrating. And I hope that one day things will change, that there will be a better process. But don't lose hope. There's help out there. And you can contact me if you're in California. I know a lot of resources in California. Or you can go to my website and it gives you a few links on where to start.
Mhm. Thank you so much. Wait, I have another question. So, just with your mom, since the cancer had gone far, were you able to get hospice care for her?
No, she was never. in hospice care because she was hooked up to a vent and she had blood transfusion. And even though in this picture, I, worked in hospice, my brother-in-law worked in hospice. His mother-in-law has been in hospice for 40 years. And
40
still
years,
there's
see?
for 40 years, and there's still misconception about hospice. And so the decision maker did not want to put my mom on hospice. And so I was there in her last moments, and I told her that this is not a way to live. And mom, you can go, we'll be okay. And she did. And so, yeah.
So you gave her that moment. Wow. You know, wow. Wow. I didn't know that. I know we caught up a little bit on the phone, but I didn't realize that, um, the family dynamics is what we manage in hospice care, dealing with the siblings and, the decision makers and the parents. And it's not even us being in healthcare. We still deal with these painful moments. And
Yeah.
so thank you for sharing that, because there are a lot of misconceptions. And recently I, tried to do some myth busting, and it's my mission here, to make hospice care more friendly, that they understand what it's about. It's about family dynamics. It's about giving our loved ones what they deserve at the end, a peaceful end, and hope for the family. So thank you for sharing that. I hope that, this work that you're doing is fulfilling, and you continue to help more people, and that this show will amplify your work. So thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Dr. Gutry, for having this podcast, and we're going to help people one at a time.
Amen. Take care. Peace.